Hello everyone. I'm going to give you a brief rundown about what plagiarism is and what plagiarism isn't. We're starting here with the University Academic Dishonesty Policy. This is from the 2016-2018 catalog. It is good for all campuses, on ground and online, undergraduate and graduate. So I want to point out a few things. You can read this here of what academic dishonesty is. But I wanted to point out this paragraph in particular, or parts of it. You'll notice that we use the word unethical behavior, which violates standards of scholarly conduct. So you have to think about what that means. Is you may think you're just trying to take the easy way out, or you're just trying to cut a corner, but it is unethical. And one of our pillars of our mission at Siena Heights is ethical. So we take this very seriously here. So here's what it includes. Behaviors is cheating on assignments, plagiarizing, submitting the same or essentially the same paper for more than one course without the consent of all instructors concerned, and it goes on from there. And you can read all that. The reason I wanted to hit those things, especially plagiarizing, cheating on assignments, and using the same paper, all three of those things mean the same thing, right? So you're cheating on an assignment or an examination. That means plagiarism falls under that umbrella, as does submitting the same or essentially the same paper. So if you wrote a paper for your Comp 2 course, and then it's about some sort of bioethics, and now you're in a biology class and you'd like to submit the same paper because you could write about bioethics, unless you get written permission from both instructors, you can't do it. It's considered plagiarized. If you've given a speech on a topic and you want to take your notes and turn those into a paper, can't do it. You have to get clearance from both instructors. It's best academic interest to do it anyway, because the whole idea is that you want to learn new things. But if for some reason you want to submit the paper to both places, you need to make sure that you're getting permission from both instructors. And if you do not get permission from both instructors, you may not do it. Okay? So let's focus on specifically on other forms of plagiarizing. So that, what I explained up there, would be essentially self-plagiarism. But plagiarism is a failure to give credit for the use of any material from outside sources, including the internet. It is included but not limited to verbatim use of quote without quotation marks and adequate documentation, submission of a paper prepared by another person as one's own work, using the ideas, facts, words, photographs, pictures, graphics, or data of someone else's work, claiming them as your own, or not documenting ideas, facts, words, or data gathered during research. So, if throughout your research you end up seeing the same statistic, 70% of all people who do X believe Y, and you put that in your paper, and it suddenly just feels like common knowledge to you, it isn't. That is information that you garnered from your research, so you're going to need to cite it. And listen, here's the thing. If you're unsure if something is common knowledge or not, cite it. You can't make the assumption that everyone knows the same thing that you do. And it's always better to oversight than undercite, always. There are some things, depending on where you are, where it's okay. But in general, you're writing to general audiences. If you're writing a medical paper for a medical class, there's going to be some things that people consider to be common knowledge and you wouldn't need to cite. If you're a history major and you're writing for a 400-level history class, there are going to be some things that people consider common knowledge. But if you're writing for a general class, composition, general bio, liberal arts studies, where the audience is general, it's always better to cite than to not cite. So I want to focus on this idea here about verbatim use of quotes and what that means and what it doesn't mean. So I've done a Google search here for soccer hooligans, which is something that I find fascinating. You may not care, but that's the point, is that when we do research, it's about whatever we're interested in. Notice the first few sources are Wikipedia. Wikipedia is never a valid academic source. You should never use it. Any wiki in general. So if you come down here, there's an article from The Atlantic and about the sociological history of violence in soccer matches, in football matches. So we have an author, we have a date, we have all this information. So the example I'm going to use is this paragraph here. So this is a great paragraph. She gives some really interesting information. So what I did was I copied it and I pasted it to this Word document. And then what I did was I cited it. I used her last name and her year there. So if you go to the top, in APA, last name and year, Tiffany Wen. So I have Wen 2014. We're not worried about the reference page right now. We're just worried about the in-text citations. Believe it or not, what you see in front of you is plagiarism. And the reason it's plagiarism is I've copied and pasted word for word from this source. And I have not, and I've cited it. I've given her credit. I'm not pretending that these are my thoughts. But because I didn't use direct quotes, because I didn't use quotation marks, it's plagiarized. So what do? Well, this is a direct quote that's more than 40 words. So that actually needs to be set aside as a block quote or a long quote. It would look like that. And then the next things that you would write would go back to normal like this. And so you can see how that works. So that is saying to the reader, all of this information is directly quoted. I copied and pasted it from Miss Wen's article. I've given her proper credit, and it is a direct quote. So, well, there's other options, though. There's ways to get around it so that you aren't quoting everything directly, but maybe there's some things in here that you want to do. So let's go down here. And what I've done was I took her entire paragraph. I'm going to move this up so they're all on the same screen here. And I've made her direct quote my paraphrase. For some reason, due to the modern name of soccer hooligans, folks think violence in soccer is a recent phenomenon. So that I've given her credit. I've summarized her paragraph into one sentence. But maybe there's a direct quote. Maybe just to prove my point, what I want to do is I want a direct quote. So the fact is, quote, violence has been related to English soccer since the 13th century. So now I've cited her twice because I've gone from a paraphrase to a direct quote. Both of those things are going to need to be cited and quoted. Okay? So this is a quote, so therefore it's cited. This is a cite. So there's a difference. So this is being cited. This is quoted and cited. Okay? Don't interchange those words. You cite when you paraphrase. You cite when you quote directly. The only time that you shouldn't be citing in any research document is where it's your commentary. So if I wanted to write, if I wrote that, there's no citations needed. As an American, I was unaware of these facts. That's my commentary on that. Now, of course, depending on the paper, whether you should be allowed to write in first person or not is all stylistic and up to the individual class. But this is not plagiarism. This is not plagiarism, but this is plagiarism. Okay, so down here, we have our author citing someone else. She says this Dr. Frostic is an expert in sports safety, security, who authored Football Hooliganism. Now, she's writing in a newspaper or an article for a magazine, so the citation rules in journalism are different than the citation rules in academia. So it's easy for you to look at this and go, well, she didn't cite it. She just said his name, so therefore it must be okay. That's not true. Her rules are different. So you can't just look at the way that someone else has written by just saying, hey, I threw quotation marks, I said the person's name. If this were a piece of academic writing and you were her writing this to turn into your class, you would still have to have a year after Dr. Frostic's last name. That's called a signal phrase, and there's a special way to do a signal phrase when you're citing one person inside another person. It's called as cited in. So if you were to use this, so let's go ahead and take this information and move it over to our Word document here. So we haven't read Dr. Frostic's book, Football Hooliganism. We haven't read this book. So what we could do is something like this. You would do this. There, I've paraphrased this paragraph, and I've said as cited in when. That means you didn't specifically read this person's work, but you can use that person's name. You still cite it correctly here. This is not plagiarism. Of course, just copying and pasting this here and thinking, oh, well, there's direct quotes here, so therefore I'm safe. That would be plagiarism. Even if you went ahead and did a block quote here, this would still be plagiarized because you didn't actually read this information. You're quoting something you didn't actually read. So this is the way to go about that. Okay, let's go back to our policy here. Faculty must explain dishonesty and plagiarism at the start of each semester. So in my syllabus, for example, I just have this exact policy there. Most faculty members will have that. By embedding this video, this is the way for a faculty member to include a plagiarism policy. This is the campus-wide plagiarism policy. It's more difficult to prove than prevent. Each faculty member is encouraged to take every reasonable measure to prevent academic dishonesty from occurring. In my course, for example, I give a 0 on any assignment, no matter how big or small, for anyone who plagiarizes. So the paper could be worth 25% of the final grade, or it could be 1% of the final grade, a 0 for that assignment. If someone does it more than once, I would take more extreme action. Generally, no one does it more than once in a semester. So what this means is we take this seriously here at Siena Heights. This is something that is important for you to understand, that we are not going to take this lightly. We're going to use the service called turnitin.com, where your papers are submitted and compared not only to other student papers here at Siena Heights, but around the world. It also compares your papers to information that is submitted via data, via journals, via internet searches, via newspapers, via all of that information. Essentially, Turnitin will compare your paper to printed documents from around the world, and will let us know that way. A lot of times, though, instructors will get a sense before the paper even is submitted to Turnitin.com if the writing isn't the same. If you are writing in one's particular voice in discussion and suddenly your paper sounds completely different, you sound like an average college student who works hard and has a good vocabulary and uses proper netiquette in your discussion posts, and then in your paper you sound like a PhD candidate from the University of Toronto, that's going to raise a red flag to the instructor before the Turnitin report is even run. So these are just some basic examples of what plagiarism is. Why it's important. We want you to represent yourself. There's no point in getting an education if you're just planning on stealing someone else's ideas. So I hope that this was informative. Of course, you can reach out to your instructor or any member of the academic team here at Siena Heights to get any other questions answered as you need.